Hi, Debbie. Welcome to the show. Thank you so much for being here. This is such an important topic. This how an unhealed betrayal impacts our health, work, and relationships. It's something that I see with the people I work with with whatever their health issues are, and it's just sort of that last step. It should probably be the first step in getting through the healing process, but sometimes we're not aware. So, can you tell us a little bit about your story, how you got into this, and why you're doing what you're doing now?
Sure. I mean, I've been in health, mindset, personal development since 1991.
Okay.
And as I changed, my business would change. And then it went from health and then moved towards stress and stress related illnesses. So, holistic dietitian and personal trainer, then whole health coach, then functional diagnostic nutritionist, where I was testing people for stress related issues and disorders, and then trauma. And then I had my own. So I had a horrible family betrayal. And you know how the universe works. You didn't quite learn the lesson. You were meant to
Yes.
learn to get more opportunities. So I
Yes.
did. And this time it was my husband. And anybody who's been through it knows how devastatingly painful it is. You're shocked. You're blindsided. You can't see straight. It's just, it's such a devastation to life as you've known it. So with that, I just, maybe not what other people would do, but one of the first things I did was enroll in a PhD program.
Yeah.
And it
That
was,
would be the big first step for most people, probably not.
yeah, because I was, and here's why. I was
Uh-huh.
desperate to understand
Yes.
how the mind works and why we do what we do and how I could heal.
Right.
So I did, and while I was there, I did a study, and I studied betrayal because that's where I was deeply immersed in.
Mm-hmm.
What holds us back? What helps us heal? And what happens to us when the people closest to us lie, cheat, and deceive? And it was a PhD in transpersonal psychology. That's the
Mm-hmm.
psychology of transformation and human potential. Because I was changing, and I didn't quite understand it. My husband, on his own, he was changing too. So I just wanted to study things at that level to really have a much greater sense of
Mm-hmm.
what was happening and how I could get out of this mess. And that study led to 3 groundbreaking discoveries. And it changed my business, it changed my health, it changed my family, it changed my life. And thankfully, now the lives of others too. So it's exciting.
And you did a TEDx talk on that as well, right? So,
Yeah, it's interesting. I did two, and the first one, this is so crazy because the first one was on sabotage, and it was 6 weeks after my betrayal. So my life came crashing down, and honestly, I look back at that, and I don't even know how I did it because
mm-hmm.
it was what I had been going through at the time. But there was something that happened during that talk that I just felt like something's going to this my life is changing now. I don't
Right.
quite know how, but something big is going to happen. And but I wasn't really ready to share my betrayal just yet. But the second one, do you have post betrayal syndrome? I did, and that was terrifying. But
I'm sure.
it's the kind of thing where it's I saw on a one-on-one basis how much it was helping clients to see the changes I was making and how I was healing from something that, I mean, I look at betrayal as truly one of the most painful of the human experiences.
Yeah,
Be-
for sure.
Because these are the people, we've been the closest to. These are the people we've trusted the most. So when the people you trust the most prove untrustworthy, where do you go? Who do you talk to? Who do you trust?
Mhm.
So, yeah, so that second one, the second TEDx, that was a game changer.
Okay, well, that sounds like everybody should be watching that. I'll definitely link that in the show notes for people to be able to view that. So, with your study, you said you did
Mhm.
a study on betrayal,
Yeah.
and you talked about three groundbreaking things that you learned from that came out of that. Could you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, that was so exciting. And the way I did the study too, I didn't want a real broad-based study where it's just, thousands and thousands of people, but I don't really get a deep dive look into their lives. The
Hmm.
study was fewer people, but really, really deep. And it was undeniable. I mean, it was just so exciting. So the first discovery was that healing from betrayal is very different than healing from other life crises, death of a loved one, disease, natural disaster. I'd been through death of a loved one. I'd been through disease. I had peritonitis. I was in
Mhm.
the ICU for 11 days. I mean, it's truly a
Wow.
miracle I'm alive. But it felt so different for me. But I didn't want to assume. So I asked all my study participants, I said, is betrayal different for you? Hands down, unanimously, comparing it to anything else they had been through, they said that it was vastly different. And, originally I was studying post-traumatic growth, which is kind of like the upside of trauma, how that trauma
Sure.
leaves you with a new perspective, awareness, insight that you didn't have before that trauma. But betrayal also involved the complete rebuilding of the self, you know, worthiness, confidence, belonging, rejection, abandonment, like they all get trashed. So
Sure.
all of that needed to be rebuilt. So it didn't feel the same healing, just healing from trauma in general. Healing from betrayal involved healing the self as well. So it needed its own name. So I coined a term, post betrayal transformation. So that is the state of complete and total healing after betrayal. And so that was exciting. The
Mhm.
second one, this was a shocker, total shocker. And it was just as I was, kind of having all the research all around me and looking for patterns and looking for all kinds of stuff, we saw that there are 5 stages that we will go through if we completely heal. You
Mhm.
don't skip the stages, you don't, change the order. You will go through these 5 stages. And what's even more exciting about that is now we know what happens physically, mentally, and emotionally at every stage. And we know what it takes to move from one stage to the next. So that means healing from betrayal has just become predictable.
That's nice because that's part of the process is the unknown, and people are
Yeah.
so overwhelmed and so they can't even think straight when they're going through something like this, and to not have any clue how it's going to come out in the end is really difficult. So I'm sure that helps the process a ton.
It's that lifeline of, okay,
Mhm.
this is where I am. This is what I need to do to get from one stage to the next. And so all we do now is put people on this sort of predictable path to move from one stage to the next.
Right.
But it was interesting because what I see so often is people get stuck, and they get stuck typically in and I can go through the 5 stages, but what's a stage 3?
Mhm.
They think that's as good as it gets, having no idea that they can predictably get to stage 4 and stage 5, which, I mean, that's where transformation happens.
Right.
So that was just so exciting. And I can go through that if you'd like.
Yeah,
And
if
the
you can list off the 5 stages, that'd be awesome.
Sure, sure. And then I can go through the third discovery after if you want.
Sure.
So the first stage is like a setup stage, and I saw this with every single study participant, me included. And if you imagine 4 legs of a table, the 4 legs being physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual. What I saw with every single study participant, me too, was a real heavy lean on the physical and the mental, and really kind of neglecting the emotional and the spiritual. So what
Mhm.
does that look like? It looks like we're really good at thinking and doing, and not really paying attention to the feeling and being. Well, what does this have to do with betrayal? Well, you know, our intuition lies within the feeling and being, and we turn that down.
Right.
And it's not to say that if you're busy, it's a setup for betrayal, but it just shows that we're so good, especially women, at getting stuff done, and the only way we do that is to shut down the feeling and being so we can,
Mhm.
get through our to-do list. I mean, I have 4 kids, 6 dogs, I'm running a business. It's like, who's got time to feel,
Right.
So
Yeah.
it's really common. And anyway, so that was stage 1. Stage 2, we're blindsided. And this is the breakdown of the body, the mind, the worldview. This is D-Day, Discovery Day.
Mhm.
This is by far the scariest stage. This is where that person you thought you knew so well sort of takes a mask off, and they're like, no, this is who I've really been this whole time. And so now, you're a health expert. The shock of that ignites the stress response.
Mhm.
So now you're headed for just about every single stress related symptom, illness, condition, disease.
Mhm.
Your mind is in a complete and total state of overwhelming chaos. You can't wrap your mind around what you just learned.
Right.
And your worldview has just been shattered. Your worldview is your mental model. This person's safe. These are the rules. This is how it works. Gives us a sense of order, prevents
Yeah.
chaos. And in one moment, it's been completely shattered. So this is where the rug has been pulled out from beneath us. We are
Okay.
truly, we've lost ground. There is no sense of anything to grab hold of, and there is no sense of safety or security at all here. Terrifying.
Terrifying. Yes.
But think about it. If you were walking down the street and the bottom were to somehow bottom out on you, what would you do? You'd grab hold of whatever you could to
Mm-hmm.
stay safe and stay alive. And that's stage 3. Survival instincts emerge. It's the most practical stage. If you can't help me, get out of my way. Where will I live? How will I survive this experience? How do I feed my kids? How do I manage this? How do I get through this? And it's this is the stage, though, where I see the most people getting stuck in. Because once they've figured out how to survive, they think that's as good as it gets.
Right.
And I see so often that then they start planting roots in this space. They're like, well, maybe I'm not all that. Maybe I'm not, worthy, deserving, lovable. Maybe. And then they start calling situations and circumstances and people towards them to confirm that's where they belong. And then they pile on all these small self benefits from staying there. They get to be right. They get someone to blame. They get a target for their anger. They get, pity from other people. They get, sympathy. They don't have to do the hard work of learning to trust again. That stuff's hard. Do I trust you? Do I trust you? I forget it. I won't trust anybody,
Right.
And they stay and they plant firm roots in this space. If they're willingness is a huge part of this. If they're willing to let go of those benefits for just, an entirely new identity, new life, new everything, health, an improved immune system, you name it, they can
Mm-hmm.
move to stage 4. Stage 4 is finding and adjusting to a new normal. Here's where you realize my old norm doesn't exist anymore. It's no longer an option. You've accepted that it's no longer an option. And what's interesting about this, this is like if you've ever moved to a new house, condo, office, apartment, whatever, you don't have all your stuff there. It's not quite cozy, but
Mm-hmm.
you know it's going to be okay. We're starting to turn down the stress response a little bit here. You're not healing necessarily, but you're not creating that massive damage you were in those earlier stages. But it's interesting here too, because think about it. If you were to move, you don't necessarily take everything with you, right? You
Right.
take the things that represent the version of you want to become. And what was so common also in this stage was people didn't, if your friends weren't there for you, you don't bring them with you into this stage. You've outgrown them. You see the
Yes.
differences too much, and it's so common and people don't understand what's happening here, but that's pretty much what that is. So this is stage 4. When you've settled into this new space, you're feeling good here. You feel like, okay, I can do this. I'm making a new life here. I'm making this work. You can move on to the 5th most beautiful stage. And this is healing, rebirth, and a new worldview. The body starts to heal. You've turned down the stress response. You didn't have the bandwidth for self-love, self-care, eating well, exercising. You were
Mm-hmm.
surviving. That was like the last thing on your mind. Now you want to treat yourself better. You want to show yourself some self-care. You want to nurture yourself. Your mind is changing. You're making new rules, new boundaries, based on where you are now, what you've learned. And you're creating a new worldview, a new mental model, new set of rules. And the 4 legs of that table, how we were only prioritizing the physical and the mental, we're solidly grounded because now we're paying attention to the emotional and the spiritual too.
That is amazing, though. I'm just so glad that we went through those, because I think as you're talking, I was thinking just things in my life, and I'm sure
Mm-hmm.
everybody is resonating with different things. It doesn't have to be the exact betrayal that you were talking about, but everybody has their own version of that and has gone through that kind of thing, unfortunately. So that's mind blowing. That's just that information right there is going to be very helpful, because people can kind of see where they're at and why they maybe don't progress to the next level of true transformation, of true healing. And I love that you talked about stage 3, and that's where we start to, plant the roots, or just, keep rooted in that stage where we just think this is all that's there for me, because we're not working through some of that stuff from stage 1, that unworthiness and the confidence that just was shattered and all those types of things. And so if we get stuck in stage 3, that can be a long process.
It can be
And
the rest of our lives. And
yeah.
I mean, and I'm sure you see it with your clients and patients. People are coming in with issues, 10, 20, 30, 40 plus years old,
Mm-hmm.
and these issues don't go away. And they assume, and this gets us to the third discovery, they
Yes.
assume, well, this is just where I am. This is just part of life. This is just aging. No, it's not. No, it's
No.
not. This is an unhealed betrayal. And that's why we see it where people are in this stage, which is so common. They're not happy with their health. They're not happy with their bodies. They're not happy with their relationships, their finances, their work, their lifestyle, their lives. But they've resigned themselves to like, okay, this is as good as it gets. There were also 3 groups who did not heal in the
Okay.
study. And it was interesting because these were the ones, and we sort of touched on it a little bit, but like one of the groups refused to accept their betrayal. So that's a group who, let's say they're in stage 3 and they're just unwilling to just accept it.
Right.
No. And it's interesting. I use and I use this analogy in the TEDx, but I'll
Mm-hmm.
share it here because you'll see the total difference between resilience and transformation using this analogy of a house. Ready? So resilience is bringing back, restoring,
Mm-hmm.
and we need that for our everyday. Trauma and transformation is a whole different thing. So
Mm-hmm.
like, let's say your house needs a boiler, you get a boiler. Let's say it needs a roof, you get a roof. That's resilience. You're bringing
Mm-hmm.
it back, you're restoring. Here's trauma and transformation. A tornado comes by and levels your house. A new boiler's not going to fix it, and a
Right.
new roof's not going to fix it. Here's the thing. You have every right to stand there at the lot where your house once stood and say, oh my gosh, this is the worst thing that's ever happened in my whole life. And you'd be right.
Mm-hmm.
And you call your friends over and say, isn't this the most terrible thing you've ever seen? And they'd all agree. And you have every right to complain and mourn and scream and kick and cry about your house.
Right.
If you choose to rebuild your house, why build the same one? There's nothing there,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like, why not give it everything the old house didn't have? That's the gift in betrayal. Like in my 2 betrayals, rebuilding is always a choice. Whether you rebuild yourself and move on, that's what I did with my family. It wasn't an option to rebuild. Or if the situation lends itself, if you're willing, if you want to, you rebuild an entirely new relationship with the person who hurt you. And that's what I did with my husband. Not long ago, we married each other again.
Oh,
Totally
wow.
different people, new rings, new vows, new dress, and our 4 kids is our bridal party because it's leveled.
Yes.
And it's the people who just try to. You ever see those houses where you just keep patching them up, patching them
Yeah.
up, patching them up? It doesn't
Doesn't
work.
work. No.
No, no, it doesn't.
Wow, that's amazing. That's amazing. Um, so did you cover the third
No.
thing? Okay, yeah, let's go do that. I was like, I didn't think we got into that yet. So let's do that.
Yeah, sure. So the third discovery was that there is a collection, physical, mental, and emotional collection of symptoms so common to betrayal that it's known as post-betrayal syndrome. And, we have a quiz on the site to see to what extent someone is still struggling. At this point, we've had over 8,000 people who've taken it from, every age group, you name the country, they're all represented. And it's interesting because there's a question that reads, is there anything else you'd like to share? I read every
Hmm.
single one of them. And besides hearing about the physical, mental, and emotional challenges left in the wake of this type of trauma, people write things like, my betrayal happened 40 years ago. I could still feel the hate. My betrayal happened, 30 years ago. I still can't trust. My betrayal happened 15 years ago. I feel gutted. And,
Right.
we've all heard time heals all wounds, not with betrayal.
Yeah, I
It
don't think
does
that's true.
not. And Yeah. And we've learned betrayal only happens when you face it, feel it, heal it. And that's why we have a protocol to do just that.
That's amazing. I think, um, I mean, this is huge for people with their health conditions. And
Hmm.
as we've talked about it, I help people primarily with thyroid issues. And so I think in learning from them myself, just everybody has a different version of thyroid, as you know, and the stress that we understand is not helpful at all for, I mean, it's not good for anybody, but I feel that thyroid patients and stress are just, it's a complete mess. You know, any kind of stress, it seems like we're kind of wimpy. If you have a thyroid dysfunction at all, and any kind of stress that comes on, it can just blow us out of the water. I mean, it just can be so detrimental. So how, do you have a connection with people that you're helping with this betrayal process and thyroid conditions?
Yeah, even personally, I mean, I had Hashimoto's and it completely resolved itself once I healed from my betrayal. So I mean, I get it. And I had such severe adrenal fatigue too,
Mm-hmm.
adrenal dysfunction. And I
Mm-hmm.
mean, and I had a list of things that were going on. I had Epstein-Barr, I had chronic fatigue, I was losing my hair, I was gaining weight, I even had insulin resistance. I was borderline diabetic. I don't
Mm-hmm.
even eat sugar. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, it's like the stress of your situation, the stress, the pain, if it's not processed in a healthy way, and if you're not moving through it, what does the body do? I mean, the body's just freaking out. I mean, I wrote about, my book is coming out soon, Trust Again. And I share a story in there. uh, Early on in my betrayal, I wound up in the emergency room. I thought I was having a heart attack. It was a panic attack. I didn't know. I'd never had
Right.
them. And
Mm-hmm.
that's something that's common to betrayal, PTSD symptoms. I was one of those people who thought it was just sort of reserved for, people in combat. Like, oh,
Same.
they hear
Mm-hmm.
a car backfire and they're reminded of their time in war. I'm like, no, it's very real when it comes to betrayal. So there's so much that needs to be healed, and just digestive issues. I mean, that was something I didn't personally experience, but
Mm-hmm.
that is one of the most common things we see in people struggling with post-betrayal syndrome. And what's so interesting about that, I find this so interesting, when you think about what the gut does. First of all, the gut's the second brain, right? So
Yeah.
the gut digests, processes, and absorbs nutrients. Well,
Mm-hmm.
isn't a betrayal difficult to digest, absorb, and process? Is it
Yeah.
any wonder why we'd have gut issues? And my study participants would have anything from acid reflux, diarrhea, Crohn's, ulcerative colitis, IBS, diverticulitis, and then through the healing process, it just vanished. They
Right.
healed. And that's just one of the symptoms.
Yeah, I think I talk about this a lot, that stress is something that's almost used as sort of a buzzword. And we know that stress isn't good for us. We should manage our stress. We should figure that out or become less stressed, do things that help that process. But I don't think that people really understand the gravity of what that can do to our other systems and how it all plays a part, like the digestive system and the thyroid system and all that. It just
Mhm.
it's so important. So betrayal and the stress that causes, because it's not just the act of whatever the betrayal is, it's all the fallout that goes around it, how it affects the entire family, how it can affect finances, or how it can affect your job, or whatever it may be. And it's such a huge impact that I think people really they need to really understand how stress is so impactful, and figure out how to deal with it. And
You're
working through this
so
betrayal
Yeah,
process is huge.
you're so right. And I just really want to be clear. It's not only partner betrayals. I mean, I had two. It was my family as well.
Hmm.
But it's friendship betrayals. It's
Hmm.
someone in a position of authority. Self-betrayal is a big
Yeah.
thing. I'll tell you, there was one group in the study where the betrayer had no consequences. Whether, let's say, they were married and the partner betrayed, and then the other one, the one who was betrayed, stayed out of, or didn't have, the betrayer had no consequences, whether it was out of religious reasons, fear, not wanting to break up a marriage,
Mm-hmm.
finance, whatever. Not only did they not heal physically, they were the most sick. They had the most symptoms.
Wow.
And that's self-betrayal right there.
Right.
You tell
Wow.
your broken heart you're okay. Mm-mm. No.
Yeah, we do that. We do those kinds of things because we think that's just going to help us move on and going to get over it and kind of will us through. But your analogy of that, the four legs on the table and you're only leaning on two of them, putting all the weight on there. And that happens, physiologically with our organ systems as well. And then they kind of, peter out and the others take the brunt and we just start shutting down. And that's where all this chronic condition starts to show up. And so in the beginning, when we were talking about your study, it made me, I was going to ask you some betrayal characteristics, so, and there's many, many kinds of betrayal, as you were just mentioning, but what are some of the common characteristics of someone who has gone through that, betrayal and is
Mm-hmm.
having some symptoms manifest in them or characteristics of processing through that or anything that makes sense with what you were saying? It just, I should have asked, right? I should interrupt and ask you right away, but it just made me think, it's probably very common things that we just sort of push aside. So
Yeah.
are there things you can talk about with that?
Sure. I'll tell you, if I had to say, what's the profile of
Yeah.
someone? Yeah. Let's call her Sue.
Okay.
Sue is, she could be 20 to, up. And before she says a word, you can feel her stress, her anxiety, her sadness, her pain.
Mm-hmm.
She's not sleeping well. So she's using a lot of caffeine and sugar to give her energy. Because of that, she's also putting on a good amount of weight. She's so completely overwhelmed. She cannot focus. So she goes to her doctor, who recommends anti-anxiety meds or mood stabilizers to manage her mood. At the end of the day, maybe she'll have a glass of wine or two or three or something to manage the mood, to numb, to avoid, to distract.
Mm-hmm.
She's doing this over time. So think of this combination. She's not sleeping well, so she's exhausted. Because she's exhausted, she's fueling herself with, artificial energy. So then she's crashing constantly. She can't sleep, so she's not getting the restful, restorative sleep she needs to heal. And she's just taking something to numb, avoid, distract,
Mm-hmm.
which is preventing her healing as well. While she's doing all of that, she's struggling because with betrayal, we take it so personally.
Right.
So she's struggling with her self-esteem, with her identity, with her level of confidence, with worthiness, with trust, with a feeling of and sense of rejection and abandonment. And now here she is. She's trying to get through her day. She's trying to work, or she's trying to raise her kids, or she's trying to just take care of whatever she has to take care of. It's near impossible.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the biggest things I see too is, at a time where we need support the most, which would be in our characters, thing, Sue, right now,
Mm-hmm.
we're the least likely to seek it because there's so much shame.
Right.
And so much fear of judgment. And that was something that I saw with study participants, me too. So, and often we're even protecting the betrayer at our own expense,
Mm-hmm.
Because it's like everybody loved him or her, so we don't want them to look at them differently. We don't want to hear about it. We're so embarrassed. And we suffer and struggle in silence, and we do ourselves a huge disservice when we do.
Wow.
That's exactly why I created my community, to solve every one of those issues.
Right.
Because we don't, what I found is we only think that the options are to take something, to just be in some kind of support group, which typically is negative and bashing. And what is that doing for you? Or just to see, a therapist, which talk therapy is helpful, but this stuff is body-based. This is in the tissues. We've got to get this stuff out. So, that's, I think, what people typically think they can do to help heal. But there's so much more, so much more.
So how do people get started? I mean, I know I'll have your links in the show notes for people to be able to contact you, but you also have a quiz, and that's one way to get started.
Hmm.
And then if you want to talk about that, and then maybe some other tips that you might have for people to get going.
Sure. I mean, the quiz is so great because it shows you to what extent you're struggling. And it may even be a little jarring just to even take the quiz
Hmm.
because, I mean, I'm asking symptom after symptom if you have it, and you're going to be taking it saying, oh my gosh, I have this, I have this, I have this. And it's
Hmm.
tied to betrayal. So that's one thing. And then we have our community, and that's the PBT, as in Post Betrayal Transformation um, Institute membership community. And really what that is, what I did was all I did was take what the study proved we need to heal, what
Hmm.
the 8,000 plus people who have said what they needed, what helped me heal, what helped my clients heal, and I made a community around it. So it's just, we have certified coaches teaching classes in there. They're all certified, but they're also bringing in health, and they're certified in trauma therapies and certified in emotional intelligence, just like the greatest things,
Sure.
master classes, and then the support of the community. And I'm in there, and all my programs are in there, and it's just an amazing space.
So it's a membership program, and it's truly holistic. It sounds like in all the ways holistic. So we'll have that on the show notes too. So it's the pbtinstitute.com. That's where the community is.
They can find it there.
They can find it there. Perfect.
Yes.
As well as the quiz. All
Hmm.
right. So is there anything else that you'd like to touch on? I feel like we could, I say this almost all the episodes. I feel like I could just keep talking about things, but is there anything else that you want to cover that we haven't?
Yeah, I would really just say you can't undo the betrayal, but you can control how long it affects your health, your relationships, your work, your heart. I mean, that I know for
Hmm.
sure. And the other thing is, and really anybody who's gone through this, especially if it's relational betrayal, even though it was done to you, it's not about you. And
Right.
I know that is the hardest thing to understand, but when you do, it's like part of the pathway to freedom right there.
Right. And I think the other message that's coming through from you too is be your own advocate, help yourself, that there is hope. You can get past and through a lot of these things. You just need to be proactive in it. And I love how you spelled out the stages. Like I said before, I think that'll really resonate with people and get them thinking on what they can do for themselves. So thank you
Yeah.
so much for that.
Oh, my pleasure. And that's the thing. This is nothing. I didn't do this. This is what just evolved out of
Yeah.
this study. And as long as whoever's been betrayed is willing to do this work,
Hmm.
it's not me who's going to help them. It's them. They'll predictably heal.
Yeah, them helping themselves, but you're
That's it.
giving them the tools to learn about it. So that's awesome. I appreciate it so much. Thank you for being here.
Thank
And
you.
we'll have all the information in the show notes, like I said. And I think people do so well reaching out to you and getting themselves better. Thank you so much.
Thank you.